I'm so tired of being without a man." The Apache who fell in love with the lonely rancher and unleashed the sun rose slowly over the vast plains of Arizona, painting the sky in shades of gold and soft orange. Samuel, a middle-aged rancher, was already awake, walking through the tall grass that surrounded his modest ranch. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of wildflowers and dry earth, and the soft rustle of leaves in the wind made him feel both comforted and isolated at the same time. He had lived on this land for more than 20 years, and though the ranch was large and the animals healthy, there was a quiet emptiness that seemed to stretch further than the horizon itself. Samuel had always been a man of routine. He rose with the sun, fed his cattle, repaired fences, and made sure that everything on the ranch ran smoothly. His hands were calloused and strong, a testament to the years he had spent working the land, and his eyes had a sharpness that came from years of paying attention to the smallest details. Yet, despite the strength he carried in his work, there was a softness in him that few people ever saw. Inside, he longed for companionship, for laughter and warmth that went beyond the occasional greeting in the small town nearby. His past was filled with heartbreak, memories of love lost that had left him cautious and wary. Samuel had loved before deeply, but circumstances had pulled the person he cared for away, leaving him alone. The pain of that loss had shaped him, teaching him to focus on the things he could control: his land, his animals, his daily tasks. Yet every evening as the sun dipped behind the mountains and the sky turned pink and purple, he felt the quiet ache of solitude. The nights were long and still, and sometimes he found himself staring out at the stars, wishing for someone to share the silence with, someone to sit beside him and simply watch the world together. Life on the ranch, though peaceful, was not without its challenges. There were mornings when a fence had fallen, or when a cow went missing, or when the machinery broke down at the most inconvenient times. Samuel handled these problems with patience and skill, but each challenge reminded him that there was no one else to share the burden. Even in moments of success, when the harvest was good or the cattle were healthy, he felt the absence of someone to celebrate with. He had friends in town, neighbors who stopped by occasionally, but they could not fill the deep emptiness that had grown inside him over the years. One morning, Samuel decided to make the trip to the nearby town for supplies. He loaded his truck with feed for the animals and a few tools he needed for repairs. The town was small, with dusty streets and wooden storefronts that had seen better days. It was the kind of place where everyone knew each other, and news traveled quickly from one end of the street to the other. As Samuel walked through the market, greeting familiar faces, he felt the usual mix of comfort and mild irritation at the small-town chatter. He had come to town many times before, but that day felt different, though he could not yet understand why. It was near the edge of the town square that he first noticed her. She stood quietly by the fountain, watching the world with a sense of calm curiosity. Her dark hair framed her face, and her eyes, deep and thoughtful, seemed to hold stories he could not even imagine. There was a strength about her, a quiet confidence that drew his attention without effort. She wore simple clothing, practical and unassuming, yet there was a grace in the way she carried herself that made her stand out from the crowd. Samuel felt an unusual pull, a sense of recognition, as if he had been waiting for someone like her all his life without even knowing it. Her name was Yana, and she belonged to the Apache people. She had grown up near the mountains, learning from her family the ways of the land, the stories of her ancestors, and the quiet wisdom of nature. Yet, despite the strength of her heritage and the beauty of her surroundings, she carried a loneliness of her own. Life had not been easy for her, and she had wandered from place to place, seeking work, shelter, and a sense of belonging. That morning, as she watched the townspeople move about their routines, she noticed the rancher who had just arrived in town. There was something in his quiet presence, the way he observed without rushing, that caught her attention. Samuel, noticing her gaze, felt a strange mix of curiosity and caution. He had met many people in town over the years, but there was something different about this woman. He could not put his finger on it, but there was an honesty in her eyes, a vulnerability that mirrored the quiet ache he carried inside. He nodded politely, and she returned the gesture with a soft smile, small and almost hesitant. It was a brief interaction, but it lingered in his mind as he completed his errands and drove back to the ranch. The following days passed with the usual rhythm of ranch life, but Samuel found his thoughts drifting back to the woman in town. There was a restlessness he could not explain, a curiosity that pushed him to wonder about her story. He imagined her life among the mountains, the challenges she faced, and the dreams she might carry quietly in her heart. He realized with a mixture of excitement and fear that he wanted to know her, to hear her voice and understand the world as she saw it. Then, one evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned to shades of pink and orange, a figure appeared at the edge of his property. It was Ayanna. She approached cautiously, carrying only a small bundle of belongings, and introduced herself, explaining that she was looking for work and a place to stay temporarily. Samuel, initially hesitant, felt a strange sense of relief. Here was someone who, like him, seemed to carry both strength and quiet sorrow. He agreed to let her stay, and that simple decision would mark the beginning of a change neither of them could have predicted. The first days of her stay were marked by polite conversation and mutual observation. Samuel watched as Ayanna moved around the ranch with ease, tending to the animals and helping with chores. She was efficient, attentive, and surprisingly knowledgeable about the land, which impressed him more than he expected. In turn, Ayanna observed the rancher, noticing the care he took with every task, the way he respected his animals, and the quiet kindness that shone through his otherwise reserved demeanor. Evenings became a time for quiet companionship. They would sit on the porch together, listening to the sounds of the plains, the distant calls of birds, the rustle of the wind through the trees, and the soft lowing of cattle settling down for the night. Samuel found himself opening up, telling small stories of his past, sharing moments that had been tucked away in his memory. Ayanna, in return, spoke of her childhood, the traditions of her people, and the ways she found beauty in the simplest things. There was no rush, no pressure, only the slow unfolding of understanding between two people who had long known loneliness but had not yet found each other. As the days turned into weeks, a subtle bond began to form. It was not dramatic or sudden, but quiet and steady, like the slow growth of grass across a wide field. Samuel found himself looking forward to her presence, to the sound of her laughter echoing across the ranch, to the thoughtful conversations that stretched long into the night. Ayanna, too, began to feel a sense of peace she had not known in years, a feeling that perhaps, in this solitary rancher, she had found someone who could see her as she truly was. Though neither of them spoke it aloud, both sensed that their meeting was more than coincidence. Fate, it seemed, had a way of bringing together two lonely hearts in a vast and often unforgiving land. And while the future remained uncertain, the present was filled with small moments of connection, moments that, slowly but surely, began to soften the loneliness that had long defined their lives. Samuel, the lonely rancher, and Ayanna, the woman of Apache heritage, had begun a journey together, one that promised challenges and joys alike. On that quiet ranch, under the endless sky, a story of hope and companionship was quietly unfolding, as two lives once marked by solitude began to intertwine in ways neither could have anticipated. The days that followed Ayanna's arrival at the ranch were unlike any Samuel had experienced in years. The ranch, which had always been quiet and still, now seemed to hum with energy. Ayanna moved with a natural grace, handling tasks around the ranch with a skill and confidence that impressed Samuel more than he expected. She fed the animals carefully, repaired broken fences with clever solutions, and even managed to organize the barn in a way that made the work easier and more efficient. Samuel watched her closely, noticing not only her abilities but also the joy she seemed to find in the simplest tasks. It was refreshing, almost unfamiliar, for him to see someone find happiness in the work he had done alone for so long. At first, their conversations were polite and limited to practical matters. Samuel would give instructions, and Ayanna would respond quietly but efficiently. "The north fence needs some repair," he would say, and she would nod and get to work without complaint. She never asked for much, and she worked steadily, never making a fuss even when the sun was high and the heat was strong. Samuel began to admire her dedication, but he also found himself curious about her life, her past, and the experiences that had brought her to his ranch. He tried to keep the questions casual, careful not to seem intrusive, but he could not hide his interest in her story. One afternoon, as the sun reached its highest point and the animals rested in the shade, Samuel decided to ask her about herself. They were sitting on the edge of the barn, drinking water from tin cups. "You grew up near the mountains, right?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Ayanna looked at him, a small smile playing on her lips. "Yes," she said. "I spent most of my childhood learning from the land and from my family. Life was simple, but it had its challenges. I learned early how to care for animals, how to cook, how to work with what I had." Samuel listened intently, fascinated by the way she spoke. Her voice was calm but carried a quiet strength, a determination that he found compelling. "It must have been hard sometimes," he said softly. "Yes," she replied, "but it also taught me to be strong and independent. I have learned to face life as it comes, even when it's difficult. Sometimes, though, it feels lonely." Samuel felt a pang of recognition in her words. He knew exactly what she meant. The loneliness she spoke of was something he had lived with every day for years. And for the first time, he realized that someone else understood the emptiness that could settle over a person when the world was quiet and there was no one to share it with. In the days that followed, their conversations became more frequent. They talked while feeding the animals, while repairing fences, and even during the quiet evenings when they sat together on the porch. Ayanna spoke of her childhood, of the stories her family told around the fire, of the lessons she had learned from the mountains and rivers, and the wisdom of her people. Samuel, in turn, shared small stories of his past, tales of the ranch when it was younger, of the neighbors who had come and gone, and the life he had built with his own hands. Though the bond between them was growing, it was still cautious. Samuel had learned from experience that opening his heart could lead to pain, and Ayanna had faced her own disappointments in life. Yet, there was something different about this connection. It was not forced, nor was it rushed. It was quiet and steady, like a river carving its way through the land over time, slowly but surely shaping the landscape. One morning, as the light of dawn touched the hills, Samuel found Ayanna near the chicken coop, carefully gathering eggs. She smiled at him, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. "Good morning," she said softly. "Morning," he replied, returning the smile. There was a warmth in that exchange, a sense of comfort that had been missing from Samuel's life for years. He realized he looked forward to seeing her each morning, to sharing the simple routines that now felt more meaningful with her presence. The work on the ranch continued, but the atmosphere had changed. The animals seemed calmer, almost as if they sensed the growing connection between the two humans caring for them. Samuel found himself talking more openly, sharing thoughts and memories he had long kept to himself. Ayanna listened with patience and understanding, never interrupting, never judging. She offered advice when needed, but always with respect for his experience and his decisions. In many ways, she became not only a companion but also a partner in the truest sense, someone who could share the responsibilities and joys of ranch life. One afternoon, a sudden storm rolled in from the mountains. Dark clouds gathered quickly, and the wind began to howl through the plains. Samuel and Ayanna rushed to secure the animals and protect the barns from the heavy rain that was approaching. Working together, they managed to bring in the cattle and horses just as the first drops fell. The storm was fierce, with lightning flashing across the sky and thunder rumbling in the distance. They found shelter in the barn, drenched and shivering, but laughing at the chaos outside. As they settled in the barn, drying themselves by the warmth of a small lantern, a quiet intimacy began to grow between them. They spoke of fears, hopes, and the loneliness that had marked their lives. Ayanna, with a soft voice, admitted, "I'm so tired of being without a man. I've been strong for so long, but I long for someone to care for me, someone who sees me for who I am." Samuel felt a sudden awareness of his own feelings. He realized that he, too, longed for the same connection, the same warmth and companionship. In that moment, a subtle shift occurred between them, a recognition that their bond was no longer just about work or friendship. It was about the possibility of love. The days turned into weeks, and their routine became a comforting rhythm of shared labor and quiet moments of companionship. Samuel found himself paying attention to small details he had previously ignored. The way Ayanna's laughter filled the air, the thoughtful way she cared for the animals, the gentle strength in her hands as she worked. Ayanna, in turn, noticed Samuel's quiet attentiveness, his patience, and the deep care he put into everything he did. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a sense that they could rely on each other, and that their presence in each other's lives was becoming essential. Despite the growing connection, they both faced moments of doubt. Samuel worried about opening his heart after years of solitude, fearing that love might bring pain once again. Ayanna feared losing her independence, worried that surrendering to her feelings could mean giving up the freedom she had fought so hard to maintain. Yet, each challenge brought them closer rather than driving them apart. They learned to communicate, to listen, and to respect each other's boundaries while slowly letting down the walls they had built around their hearts. Evenings became the most cherished part of their days. They would sit on the porch together, watching the sun set over the plains, sharing stories and dreams. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was filled with comfort, with understanding, and with the quiet joy of two people beginning to trust each other. Samuel found himself imagining a future where Ayanna was a permanent part of his life, where their shared efforts on the ranch were accompanied by shared laughter, care, and love. Ayanna, too, began to imagine the possibility of a life where she was no longer alone, where her strength could coexist with a partner who truly understood and respected her. As spring approached, the ranch transformed along with their relationship. The grass grew greener, the animals were healthier, and the air seemed lighter, almost as if the land itself responded to the happiness that was slowly taking root. Samuel realized that Ayanna's presence had changed him, brought warmth to his life, and reminded him of the joys he had long forgotten. Ayanna recognized that the rancher offered more than shelter and work. He offered understanding, respect, and the possibility of love she had long yearned for. Their days continued, full of work, quiet conversations, and small gestures of care. Samuel learned to share his thoughts and feelings more openly, and Ayanna allowed herself to lean on someone else for support. Together, they created a rhythm that blended independence with partnership, strength with vulnerability, and solitude with companionship. It was a slow, steady process, but one that promised the beginnings of something profound and lasting. By the end of the season, Samuel and Ayanna had formed a bond that went beyond friendship. It was a connection built on shared experiences, mutual respect, and a growing affection neither had expected to find. The ranch, once a place of quiet solitude, now felt alive with possibility. And as they worked side by side, tending to the land and animals, they also tended to the fragile, budding emotions that had begun to grow between them. In the quiet evenings, when the sky turned shades of pink and gold, and the plains stretched endlessly before them, Samuel and Ayanna would sit together, sometimes speaking, sometimes simply enjoying the presence of each other. The loneliness that had marked both their lives was slowly fading, replaced by a warmth that neither could ignore. And though they did not yet speak the words aloud, both knew that something important had begun, a connection that might just change their lives forever. The storm that had passed weeks ago left the ranch washed clean, the earth smelling fresh, and the grass glistening with the early morning sun. Samuel noticed how different everything felt now, not just in the ranch itself but in the way he viewed the days. Mornings, which once felt like endless routines of feeding and fixing, now held a quiet anticipation. He looked forward to seeing Ayanna, not just for her help, but for the warmth she brought with her presence. She moved with a confidence and ease that made even the most mundane tasks seem lighter, and Samuel found himself watching her sometimes, wondering at the strength she carried so effortlessly. One morning, Samuel was repairing a broken fence near the northern field when he heard Ayanna's soft humming from the barn. It was a melody he had never heard before, gentle yet filled with emotion. He paused in his work, leaning on his hammer, listening. There was something captivating about the sound, something that reached deeper than words ever could. When she saw him watching, she laughed softly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, and asked if he wanted to take a break. Samuel nodded, and they sat on the fence together, looking out over the open fields, letting the wind carry away any tension between them. That afternoon, they decided to take a walk along the ridge that bordered the ranch. The sun was warm on their backs, and the scent of wildflowers mixed with the fresh earth after the storm. Samuel noticed that Ayanna walked with a rhythm that seemed perfectly in tune with the land, as if she had always belonged to these plains. He realized he had never shared this particular view with anyone before, never spoken to anyone while walking along these quiet ridges. There was a peace in her company that made the world seem gentler, softer, more forgiving. As they walked, Ayanna spoke of her childhood in the mountains, of the lessons her family had taught her, and of the stories that had been passed down through generations. Samuel listened, fascinated not just by the words but by the feeling behind them, the pride, the resilience, and also the longing for connection. He realized that she, like him, carried loneliness inside her, but she faced it with courage and grace. He admired that deeply. Later that evening, as they returned to the ranch, Samuel found himself sitting beside Ayanna on the porch. The sky was painted in pink and orange, the horizon stretching endlessly before them. For the first time, Samuel felt a stirring in his heart that he could not ignore. He was aware of every detail, the way her hand rested lightly on her lap, the soft tilt of her head as she gazed at the sky, the gentle sound of her voice even when she spoke of simple things. There was a connection between them now, more tangible than before, one that went beyond shared work or conversation. It was a feeling that seemed to settle in the spaces between them, quietly growing stronger with every shared moment. The next few days brought small, meaningful moments. Samuel caught himself smiling when he heard Ayanna laughing while feeding the animals. Ayanna noticed how carefully Samuel watched over the cattle, the way he spoke to them as if they could understand his words. One evening, as they repaired a broken section of fence together, their hands brushed while holding the same plank, and a spark of electricity ran through both of them. Neither spoke, but both felt the moment. It was as if the storm they had weathered together had not only cleared the sky but had cleared a path in their hearts as well. One evening, a quiet tension lingered in the air as they prepared dinner. Ayanna was chopping vegetables, and Samuel was stirring a pot of stew. For a long moment, neither spoke. Finally, Ayanna looked up and said softly, "I sometimes wonder if it's foolish to feel this way. I've been alone for so long, and yet I feel like I've known you longer than anyone else in my life." Samuel paused, considering his own feelings. He had kept his heart guarded for decades, afraid that opening it would only lead to more pain. Yet, at that very moment, he knew that his heart had already found a reason to trust again. "I feel the same," he admitted, his voice low but steady. That night, after the chores were done, they sat together on the porch under a blanket of stars. The world was silent except for the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of an owl. Samuel turned to Ayanna, noticing the softness in her eyes, and realized that he wanted more than companionship. He wanted to share his life with her. He reached out, hesitantly at first, and took her hand in his. She looked at him, a mixture of surprise and warmth in her gaze, and squeezed his hand gently in return. It was a simple gesture, yet it carried the weight of unspoken feelings, a promise that neither had voiced but both understood. Days passed, and the ranch seemed to take on a new life. The animals were healthy and calm, the fields thriving, and Samuel and Ayanna moved through their routines with a sense of harmony. Their connection deepened with each shared meal, each repaired fence, each quiet moment spent together. Samuel began to notice the little things about her, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke of the mountains, the gentle way she cared for the animals, the quiet laughter that seemed to linger in the air long after she had stopped. Ayanna, too, noticed the nuances of Samuel's character, the patience he showed, the careful thought in every action, the deep kindness hidden beneath his reserved demeanor. One afternoon, as they worked together to mend a broken water trough, Ayanna suddenly paused. She looked at Samuel, her expression thoughtful. "You know," she said, "I've spent so many years being strong for myself, handling life alone, but being here with you, it feels different. I feel like I can let my guard down without fear." Samuel met her gaze, feeling a rush of emotion. "I've felt the same way," he said softly. "I've been alone for so long that I forgot what it felt like to trust someone, but with you it feels right." That evening, as they sat on the porch once again, a sense of closeness enveloped them. They shared stories of their pasts, their hopes, and even their fears. Samuel spoke of the heartbreaks he had endured, of the loss and loneliness that had shaped him. Ayanna shared her own experiences, the times she had faced disappointment and the moments when she had felt truly alone. Through it all, they listened to each other with care and empathy, realizing that their experiences, though different, had led them to this shared moment. The first signs of love began to emerge in subtle ways. Samuel found himself wanting to protect Ayanna, not because she was weak, but because he valued her presence and her happiness. Ayanna, in turn, noticed herself thinking of Samuel in quiet moments, feeling a warmth in her chest that she had not known for years. Their bond was no longer just about companionship. It was about understanding, trust, and the quiet joy of being seen by someone who truly cared. One evening, after a long day of work, they found themselves alone in the barn. The fire in the lantern cast a soft glow, illuminating the space with a warm, golden light. Samuel looked at Ayanna, noticing the way the light reflected in her eyes. "I feel something for you," he admitted, his voice low but steady. "I can't explain it fully, but I know I want you in my life." Ayanna's eyes softened and she reached out, placing her hand on his arm. "I feel it too," she whispered. "I've been afraid to hope, but now I can't ignore it." From that night on, the shift in their relationship was undeniable. They moved with an ease and comfort that had not existed before, sharing laughter, quiet touches, and meaningful glances that spoke volumes. The ranch, which had once been a place of solitude, now felt alive with their connection. Every task, every shared moment, carried a sense of intimacy and care that neither had experienced in years. As the weeks passed, Samuel and Ayanna continued to explore their feelings for each other. They shared long walks along the ridge, watched the sunset over the plains, and spent quiet evenings talking under the stars. Each day, their trust in each other deepened, and the walls that had guarded their hearts for so long began to crumble. Samuel realized that he no longer feared the possibility of heartbreak because he had found someone whose presence made him whole. Yana understood that love did not mean losing herself. It meant sharing her life with someone who respected and cherished her. By the time spring was in full bloom, the ranch was a place of growth, not just for the land and animals, but for their hearts as well. Samuel and Ayanna had discovered a bond built on respect, shared experiences, and an emerging love that promised to endure. They had faced moments of doubt and fear, yet through patience, understanding, and quiet courage, they had found each other. And though neither spoke the words aloud yet, both knew that something profound and lasting had begun, a connection that would shape the rest of their lives. As spring deepened into summer, life on the ranch seemed to settle into a rhythm, yet Samuel and Ayanna both knew that love was never without its challenges. Though their bond had grown stronger, the world beyond the ranch brought its own pressures, whispers, and uncertainties. The local town, small and tight-knit, was not always kind to those who followed a different path. Yana's Apache heritage was known among the townspeople, and while many admired her strength and grace, there were others who judged too quickly, assuming differences where none existed. Samuel, protective by nature, noticed the occasional sidelong glance and whispered comment from neighbors and felt a wave of unease. It was a warm afternoon when the first hint of tension arrived. A few men from town came by, ostensibly to discuss cattle trade, but their words carried subtle judgment. They made small remarks about the ranch, about Samuel's choice to take in someone of different heritage, and about what they considered unusual behavior for a woman. Samuel kept his expression calm, but inside, a storm brewed. He could see Ayanna's eyes lower, her hand tightening slightly, and he felt a protective instinct rise within him. He wanted to speak, to defend her, yet he also knew that confrontation would bring no good. Instead, he quietly ended the conversation, guiding the men toward their business and away from personal remarks, all the while feeling the weight of an unspoken truth: love, even when pure, often faced scrutiny. Yana, for her part, faced her own inner struggles. Though she felt a deep connection with Samuel, she had lived long enough to know that relationships were not easy. She feared losing her independence, worried that surrendering to her feelings might mean giving up the self-reliance she had built over years. At night, when she lay in her small room on the ranch, she thought about the past, moments when she had been hurt, times when trust had been broken. She wondered if opening her heart again was wise, if her longing for companionship might lead to disappointment once more. Samuel sensed her hesitation, even without words. He knew that her quiet moments were not merely about routine or reflection. They were about fear, about weighing the possibility of hurt against the desire for connection. He wanted to reassure her, to show that their bond was strong enough to withstand challenges, yet he also understood that trust had to be earned over time. So he continued his daily routines alongside her, quietly demonstrating care and reliability in every shared task, every thoughtful action, and every conversation filled with honesty and respect. One evening, after a long day of tending the fields, Samuel found Ayanna sitting alone by the small creek that ran along the edge of the ranch. She seemed lost in thought, her eyes reflecting the fading light of the sunset. He approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. She looked up, and for a moment hesitation passed across her face before she smiled softly. "I'm thinking," she replied. "Sometimes I worry that I'm not ready for everything this could mean. I've been alone for so long, Samuel. Letting someone in feels dangerous." Samuel knelt beside her, watching the water ripple past. "I understand," he said. "I've felt the same. I've been afraid for years that love could only bring pain, but with you it feels different. I don't want to push you. I just want you to know that I'm here and I'm not going anywhere." Yana took a deep breath, feeling the sincerity in his words. It was rare for her to encounter someone so patient, someone willing to wait without demanding, someone who could make her feel safe while also respecting her independence. She leaned slightly closer, a gesture small but full of meaning. The challenges they faced were not only internal but also practical. Ranch life was unpredictable, and each season brought its own burdens. Drought threatened crops, and disease sometimes affected the livestock. Samuel and Ayanna had to work tirelessly to keep everything in order, often from dawn until well past sunset. These long hours tested not only their physical endurance, but also their emotional resilience. There were moments when fatigue brought irritability, when small disagreements flared into tension, and when the stress of responsibility weighed heavily on both of them. Yet each challenge became an opportunity to understand and support one another, to see each other's strengths and vulnerabilities, and to grow closer through shared effort. One particularly hot summer day, a sudden illness struck a calf. Samuel and Ayanna worked side by side, tending to the animal for hours under the blazing sun. Sweat streamed down their faces, and their hands were calloused and sore, but neither wavered. Through the ordeal, they communicated silently, anticipating each other's needs, offering quiet encouragement and sharing small gestures of care. When the calf finally began to recover, they stood back, exhausted but victorious. Samuel looked at Ayanna, seeing her determination and compassion reflected in the fading sunlight, and realized that challenges like these were part of the bond they were building, tests that revealed character and deepened connection. Evenings became their time to recover, to reconnect emotionally after the physical and mental strains of the day. They would sit on the porch together, sometimes in silence, sometimes sharing stories, and sometimes simply enjoying the sound of the wind through the trees and the soft lowing of cattle settling in for the night. Samuel noticed how Ayanna would sometimes rest her head on his shoulder, and he learned to hold her gently, without pressing, without words, allowing comfort to exist naturally between them. Those moments, fleeting as they were, spoke volumes about trust and acceptance, about allowing vulnerability without fear. Despite the closeness, moments of doubt occasionally resurfaced. Ayanna questioned whether her feelings were wise, whether she was strong enough to maintain her independence while embracing love. Samuel questioned whether opening himself fully could lead to heartbreak after years of solitude. They faced these uncertainties not through confrontation, but through steady, honest communication. They spoke openly about fears, desires, and boundaries, building a foundation of understanding that allowed them to face challenges together rather than separately. One evening, after a particularly challenging day repairing a storm-damaged fence, they found themselves sitting by the fire in the barn. The warmth of the flames mirrored the warmth growing between them. Ayanna spoke softly, almost to herself, about her fear of losing herself in love. Samuel listened attentively, then placed a hand over hers. "You won't lose yourself," he said quietly. "I don't want to change you. I want to walk beside you, not in front or behind, but together. We'll face challenges, but we'll face them as a team." The sincerity in his words touched her deeply, and she realized that the love she had feared might trap her was instead freeing. She could remain herself, strong and independent, while allowing someone to care for her deeply. The local community, slowly but surely, began to notice the changes in both of them. Some continued to whisper, but others admired the way they worked together, the respect they showed one another, and the quiet joy that seemed to radiate from the ranch. Samuel and Ayanna, aware of the outside world but focused on their own lives, chose to pay little attention to judgment, understanding that love required courage and perseverance in the face of both internal and external challenges. Through it all, the bond between them continued to strengthen. Daily life, with its trials and small victories, became a canvas for their growing connection. Each challenge met together, each problem solved as a team, became a testament to their compatibility and mutual respect. Yana's strength complemented Samuel's steadiness, and Samuel's patience nurtured Yana's willingness to trust again. Together, they created a partnership rooted in equality, understanding, and care. By the end of the summer, both Samuel and Ayana had faced fears, doubts, and obstacles, yet they emerged stronger. The ranch, once merely a place of work and solitude, had become a home filled with shared purpose and quiet joy. The challenges they faced, both from within themselves and from the world around them, had not weakened their bond but had forged it in the fires of patience, trust, and resilience. They realized that love was not only about shared happiness, but also about supporting one another through difficulties, standing side by side when life tested them. In those quiet moments, as the sun set behind the hills and painted the sky with streaks of gold and pink, Samuel and Ayana would sit together, feeling a profound sense of connection and acceptance. They had faced doubt and fear, scrutiny and judgment, and through it all, they had chosen each other. The love that had begun with quiet curiosity and shared work had grown into a bond that could withstand challenge, a partnership built on mutual respect, understanding, and the courage to embrace life together. Though neither spoke of the future explicitly, both knew that the foundation they had built would carry them through whatever lay ahead. Challenges, they realized, were not obstacles to love but opportunities to strengthen it, to test patience, to deepen trust, and to affirm the choice to face life together. And in that understanding, Samuel and Ayana found a quiet, unshakable joy, a love that had endured trials and had emerged brighter, steadier, and more profound than either had ever imagined. The heat of summer began to soften as autumn approached, and with it came a gentle calm. Over the plains, the ranch, once simply a place of work and solitude, had transformed into something richer, something alive with the shared presence of Samuel and Ayana. They had spent months working together, learning to trust, to care, and to love each other in ways that neither had imagined possible. The hardships they had faced, the storm-damaged fences, the sickness of livestock, and the judgment of townspeople had tested their bond, but in each challenge they had found strength, understanding, and deeper affection. Samuel had begun to notice how natural it felt to plan each day with Ayana. Mornings were no longer a solitary routine. They shared the tasks, the laughter, and even the small frustrations that came with tending to the land. Yana's presence brought rhythm and warmth to the ranch. She moved easily among the animals, coaxing the horses and cattle with gentle words and steady hands, while Samuel observed with a quiet pride. He found himself thinking, more often than not, about how lucky he was to have someone so capable, compassionate, and courageous beside him. Her smile had become a daily light, a comfort he had longed for without realizing it. Yana, too, recognized the change in herself. The years of wandering alone, of protecting her heart and maintaining her independence, had made her wary of trust. Yet Samuel had shown her that love did not require surrendering strength. It required opening oneself to companionship, respect, and care. In his company, she felt seen, understood, and valued, not just for her abilities or beauty, but for the whole person she was. There was a quiet magic in their connection, one that grew with each shared meal, each repaired fence, and each evening spent in companionable silence under the sky. One crisp morning, Samuel and Ayana walked along the ridge that overlooked the plains. The air was clear, carrying the smell of the freshly turned earth and the distant aroma of autumn leaves. The ranch stretched out below them, green and golden, and the animals grazed peacefully, untroubled by the humans watching over them. Samuel glanced at Ayana, noticing how the sunlight caught her hair, how her eyes sparkled with life, and how the soft curve of her lips held a contentment he had never seen before. He realized with a quiet certainty that he could not imagine a future without her. Yana turned to him, sensing the look in his eyes. "You've changed this place," she said softly, "and you've changed me too." Samuel smiled, feeling warmth rise in his chest. "You've changed me more than you know," he replied. "I never thought I could feel this way again. I never thought I could find someone who understands me so completely." They stood together, side by side, feeling the wind on their faces, the weight of unspoken feelings hanging gently in the air. As the weeks passed, they began to plan more than just the daily routines of the ranch. Samuel suggested planting a new orchard along the western field, and Ayanna offered ideas for a garden that could supply fresh vegetables and herbs throughout the year. They worked side by side, laughing when mistakes were made, celebrating small successes, and enjoying the simple pleasure of building something together. The ranch had become more than a home. It had become a shared dream, a place where their efforts, care, and love intertwined in tangible, beautiful ways. Despite the joy and progress, both remembered the moments of doubt and challenge they had faced. Yana recalled the whispered judgments in town, the fears of losing herself in a relationship, and the hesitations that had once made her question whether love was worth the risk. Samuel remembered his long years of loneliness, the heartbreak that had taught him caution, and the times he had feared opening his heart only to be hurt again. They acknowledged these memories openly, not as obstacles, but as proof of their resilience and the strength of their bond. Each challenge faced, each fear overcome, had reinforced the foundation of their love. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and painted the sky with soft shades of pink and purple, Samuel and Ayanna sat on the porch together. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of the orchard and the distant sound of a stream flowing gently across the land. Samuel turned to Ayanna, his hand brushing against hers. "We've come so far," he said quietly. "Through everything, we've stayed together. I think it's time. I want us to share everything, not just the work on this ranch, but our lives." Ayanna looked at him, her eyes glistening, and nodded. "I feel the same," she whispered. "I've wanted us for so long." Their decision to commit to each other was not marked by grand gestures or elaborate celebrations. Instead, it was a quiet understanding, a promise spoken in glances, smiles, and gentle touches. They continued to live and work on the ranch, but now every shared chore, every meal, and every evening under the stars carried an added depth of meaning. Love was no longer a distant hope. It was present, tangible, and thriving in their daily lives. The community began to notice a change in both of them as well. Those who had once whispered doubts now observed the harmony between Samuel and Ayanna. They saw a partnership built on respect, mutual support, and genuine affection. People admired how they complemented each other, Samuel's steady patience paired with Ayanna's resourceful energy, his quiet strength with her courage and compassion. Slowly, the ranch became a symbol not only of hard work but of the beauty of connection, the possibility of love enduring beyond hardship and loneliness. As autumn deepened, the first harvest approached. Together, they gathered the crops, tending to each plant with care. Samuel marveled at the abundance they had created, at the tangible result of their shared labor. Yana laughed as she handed him a basket of apples, her eyes sparkling with joy. "We've done well," she said, her voice full of pride. Samuel nodded, smiling. "We've done more than well. We've built something lasting together." One night, after the harvest was safely stored and the animals were settled, Samuel and Ayanna sat beneath the stars, wrapped in a blanket and sharing quiet conversation. They spoke of dreams for the future, plans to expand the orchard, ideas for improvements to the ranch, and hopes for a life filled with companionship, laughter, and shared purpose. There was a sense of peace between them, a deep satisfaction in knowing that they had overcome loneliness, fear, and uncertainty to find something enduring. Ayanna rested her head on Samuel's shoulder, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat and the steady warmth of his presence. "I never imagined it could feel like this," she murmured. "I never thought I'd find someone who sees me completely, who makes me feel safe, loved, and respected all at once." Samuel kissed the top of her head gently, a soft smile on his face. "I've waited a long time to feel this way too," he said, "and I know now that it's worth everything we've been through." As winter approached, the ranch remained a sanctuary for both of them. Snow dusted the fields lightly, and the crisp air carried the scent of pine and earth. Inside the house, the warmth of a fire and the presence of each other created a sense of home that neither had experienced before. They worked through the chores together, laughed at small mistakes, and celebrated successes with quiet joy. Their partnership had become natural, almost effortless, built on months of shared effort, care, and love. By the time the first heavy snow fell, Samuel and Ayanna understood that their love had grown into something permanent, something that would sustain them through any challenge. They had faced solitude, fear, and doubt, yet through patience, understanding, and unwavering support, they had found each other. The ranch, once a symbol of Samuel's loneliness, was now a symbol of their connection, their shared dreams, and the life they had built together. In the evenings, they would often sit together on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the snow cover the plains in a soft, white layer. Samuel held Ayanna's hand, feeling the warmth of her touch, and she rested her head against his shoulder. Words were often unnecessary. Their presence spoke volumes. They had discovered that love was not only about grand gestures or dramatic moments, but about the quiet, consistent acts of care, trust, and shared life. The story of Samuel and Ayanna became a quiet legend in the town. People spoke of the rancher and the Apache woman who had found love in a place that once seemed lonely and isolated. Their story was not just about romance. It was about resilience, patience, and the courage to open one's heart despite fear and past hardships. It was a story that inspired others to believe that connection, understanding, and true partnership were possible, even after years of solitude. And so, life continued on the ranch, full of work, shared laughter, quiet evenings, and the steady rhythm of seasons. Samuel and Ayanna had found not only love but also a home in each other. Their journey had not been easy, but it had been worth every step. The lonely rancher had discovered that love could return, even after years of waiting, and the Apache woman had found that strength and independence could coexist with trust, care, and deep companionship. Together, they had created a life that was not only surviving but thriving, a life full of warmth, joy, and the enduring power of love.